of our lives, of our education, and the stuff and what you heard Sister Betty say, it was like Tuesday night, like it was just a regular, all the knowledge that was dropped at WBAI, so it was really wonderful. It was kind of like Sunday was WKCR with Lionel Legault, who is here, who's also a pioneer in our
Stand up, Lionel.
Yeah.
And Lionel's wife, Jessie, thank you.
Yes.
Nothing happens without Jessie, right?
Yes, Lionel and Jessie. I was going to get to Jessie, which was our Sunday mornings before church. That's how we caught up. BAI, we caught up into the Pan-Africanism, and Lionel was the Haiti on Sunday mornings. So it's really wonderful to have both of those forces in the room. And it's very interesting that Sister Betty evoked this idea of answering the call of the blood on the ground, because I feel in a way that this is what this book is. It's really answering an ancestral call. For those of you who are new to this, the signs around here. So in 1937, there was a massacre of Haitians and Dominicans of Haitian descent, of Black Dominicans, and on the borderlands between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And something like, the numbers range, they'll say between 20 and 40,000 people were killed. And I have, it's all right, it's Sister Betty. We make this exception. It might be an urgent call for Sister Betty.
Don't break the phone.
Yes. Yes, and I have, in my family, there have been people who have gone from Haiti to work in the sugarcane, and so we would always hear like passing references to this massacre. If we had people hadn't heard from them, they would say, oh my gosh, which would be we call it also coup de couteau, which is kind of a knife wound, because a lot of the massacre was done with machetes, and which is there's a parallel to the Rwandan genocide, which was also carried out in this way. And there was some dispute for many years, whether it was just soldiers or it was civilian population, but there was animus roused up between, people who before had been living, communally together, but then the borders also, and at the same time in the 30s, there was a lot of American sugar interest, and the U.S. had occupied Haiti from 1950 to 1934, and there was a bit of that from there was a part of the occupation where the whole island was under U.S. control, and there were a lot of sugar companies, and that border kept shifting, so that some people, you might go to sleep in Haiti one night, and then you wake up in the Dominican Republic the next day, because that border was being shifted in terms of where the workers are and how many people they also needed to work in the cane fields. So when I started writing this book when I saw a painting by a painter whose grandmother had survived it, and I started asking him questions, and we started talking about it, and I realized how much we don't linger, and it's so much this massacre on our side of the border, but at the same time, when you write a book, sometimes if it's a historical book, it's set in the past, you think, oh, this was a terrible time, but thank God this is over, and it may never happen again. This is not the case here. As I'm speaking to you, like on October 2nd of this year, the current president of the Dominican Republic, Luis Abinader, announced that he was going to be on the anniversary of the massacre, and I think that's what you're saying, the psychological, like the metaphysical imperialism,
yes.
And so on that day decides to announce that he will be deporting 10,000 Haitians a week, and the people a week, and the people if you know anybody there, like many of us do, people they're afraid to leave their homes. Because if you come out, even if you have papers, they take the paper from you. And people, and the last time there was a big deportation, I went to the border, we talked to people we met and who said that you could have papers, they'll take your papers and still bring you to the detention place and then deport you. So, and if you imagine, and this is what's been threatened to happen here too,
yes.
If you imagine trying to deport 10,000 people a week, the violence involved in that. Like, and also we see pictures of how people are carted and put in these cages, basically, as we're moving them to those detention places. So it's something that every time that we've never had a commemoration really, and I was listening to the drums, I thought of that as a kind of commemoration. But it's a moment where we're looking at the past with the future, kind of we're seeing the circularity of this past, that it's something that can very much continue to happen because people also, because of the rhetoric about Haitians here, which has gone around the world and travels with the social media, people feel like they can impact, like they can be violent against us. And I think part of this too was, Abinada felt even more empowered to do this. So much so, even before this year, you had instances where the U.S. Embassy was telling, had an alert to Black Americans who travel to the Dominican Republic, saying basically you might be mistaken for a Haitian and be detained, and so if such an alert goes out, it's with all the diplomatic channels, it's something that's very dramatic. And so the book, in a way, keeps, as much as it's one of those things that as much as you would like to think it lives in the past, lives in the present. So that's one of the reasons that I'm glad we're here in community, particularly this community, talking about this at this moment in time, because it's not something it's not over. It's not over. It's not over for our community. It's not over for our community in Springfield. It's not over for our community in Santo Domingo. It's not over for this community in Harlem. And and sometimes the way we remind ourselves is by thinking of these stories. And it's not that we're lingering. It's not that, but we don't want people to forget.
That's right.
I realize there's a lot of real good positive energy in the room. I went to, what they say, shout out to my Komokoda family who's in the room. Kote mun Komokoda rela. So Komokoda is the Committee to Mobilize Against Dictatorship in Haiti. This October, organization is 10 years old. And a lot of people were shocked when it was an election here. Hillary Clinton against, what's his name? The dog, right? Donald Trump. We had a listener who could never say Trump, so she would call him Chuck. But at that time, Komokoda, we took the responsibility to say that because of all the evil that this Clinton family had done to Haiti, we said, if it's a dog running against the Clintons, we're gonna ask you to please, go like this. But yeah, and so it took a lot of courage for Komokoda because Trump is not easy, But in this room, she's not here right now, she's up front, and some of you might not have recognized her, is Sharon Salam. Sharon Salam, she's here. Please stand up, sister, please stand up. Thank you very much. When this, and Amadou, my son who is, Kilaj Amadou is in 24, yeah. He's 25 next month, I don't know. But I was introducing him to Sharon and I was telling him, do you know who this woman is? And I said, when this thing happened, that the Central Park jogger, you guys know, it was so beautiful to see the courage of this woman standing up practically alone for her son and some people in our community, And so please give her a hand. This is really, really, really powerful. This is Yusuf Salam's son. And also we have to remember that it was Ralph Pointer who was interviewing Matthias, that was his name, in prison. And Matthias admitted that he's the one who did this crime. And they did DNA and they found out that these young men were innocent. But Donald Trump, folks can remember, took out full-page ad, you know, in the New York Times to say New York should bring back the death penalty to kill these kids, animals, New York called them. Animals who were what? Wilding was the word, right? So, but, you know, the thing I want to point out is so many of us, progressives, black folk, sympathized, looked at these children like they were not our children, like we would stand by and allow this modern day lynching to happen. So again, really, every time I see Sharon, I'm happy. Thank you, sister. I want to, it's hard when you're doing this because, but anyway, really happy that everyone who made it out to this event. There's a brother there, Jean-Paul Spence. This is my coach on Haiti. Our revolution continues. Every program, you know, he has to analyze, psychoanalyze. Please stand up, Jean-Paul. He tells me, Dahoud, this music, you know, we need more drumming. And we have to give them the drums. Thank you, Jean-Paul. And I have to say hello to Hervé and Mildred. This is my family from school in Stony Brook. And I haven't seen Mildred since college. I think I saw Hervé. But thank you guys for coming, for supporting. So, EDWIDGE, everybody I see, every interview, they ask you, like, how did you start writing? And Amadou, my oldest son, he rushed to read the book in 3 days so he cannot be ready for today.
So it's fresher in his mind than in my mind.
He's like, Dad, she writes so good. How did that happen for you to be able to write so good?
Well, thank you. I think it comes from all storytelling for me. When people ask me who taught me to write, I always say, you know, my grandmothers, who were not even writers, but were extraordinary storytellers. And if you're a Haitian of a certain age and you had the opportunity to have an elder in your house, or if you had those summers to go in the countryside, and people would tell stories. And I was always struck by that connection when you're telling a story to someone. And sometimes the elders, if it looks like the children are falling asleep, they would pipe in a song, there would be suspense, there was this interaction. And I thought but I was very shy. I could never do storytelling the way they were doing it. And then someone gave me a book. I was like, okay, that's the thing I can do. I can be quiet, I can listen and then transcribe what I hear. And so I started writing, but by listening to stories, by reading.
The book itself, I know that it's translated in so many different languages. What is the impact that you think that this book has had on Haitians and on Dominicans?
I hope, you know, I meet a lot of Dominicans too who didn't know this story. Initially, now there's a lot of scholarship on this, but we always had Haitians we had some Haitians who wrote about it, and some other books I can recommend if you're interested in the subject. Jacques-Stéphane Alexis' Compère Génial Soleil, which was translated on General Son, My Brother, and he talked about it from a very interesting, like he talks about it from this point of view as a Marxist and as a labor struggle, right? Like, and he really, so it starts with a character who's in prison in Haiti during the U.S. occupation, and then goes to the Dominican Republic, and then they're trying to organize people, just like in Jacques Women's Masters of the Do, right? And then there's another book, Massacre River, René Philopec's book, Au Pays des Pères Mêlés, was translated, and he was about, it was also about a love story, but he talked about this aspect of the border where people really consider themselves, they didn't consider themselves really Haitian or Dominican, but like part of this middle nation that's at the border. And the language was mixed and, you know, and everything. So in my book, I wanted to honor those things, and but also to talk about the brutality of the massacre. And sometimes, you know, there's a lot of contested about it. It always struck me that, and I think I see what we're doing here as a kind of memorial, especially as we're still in the month of October when it happened, and it struck me that there were no memorials. And when you don't memorialize, people tend to forget. And so that's, now I meet young people who are like, that's the first time I heard about the massacre, reading your book, and then I read it again. And there's a solidarity too, I think, between younger Haitians and younger Dominicans that we have to emphasize, especially in these moments of divisions. So I would go to college campuses, and sometimes there are kids who are in clubs that they call Quisqueya clubs. And the Quisqueya club, Quisqueya was before Columbus came with that Hispaniola, it was, the whole island was called Quisqueya, which is mother of all lands. And Haiti was land of the mountains, that's the indigenous names. And so there were these kids who are both Haitian and Dominican descent who gather to read books like those books that I mentioned in this book. So, I mean, for the old part, you know, people are like, that's not how it happened. But for the most part, it's been a kind of bridge building.
So we want to hear Edwidge reading, right?
Yeah.
So I'll read you this short section. This is actually in October 1937, and the folks have crossed the river and are in this center that's run by some priest where they're trying to sort out the wounded. And this was actually based on, I did a lot of research, and I went to the border and I interviewed some people, but there were also these, there's an American journalist who wrote about the massacre right after it happened, and there were some places where they logged in survivors. And so this is at this starts at a survivor center that gives you a little sense of what it was like right after. How can we not hate ourselves for the people we left behind? I have a really different edition, and you won't be able to keep up because I have a lot of things crossed out. So just listen to my voice. Okay. I couldn't remember how long I had been asleep, but when I woke up, the nuns came to the room and handed out plates of corn mush with black bean sauce and a slice of avocado, my moulag's avocat, for those who know. I refused by shaking my head, but they left the plate near me anyway. As they ate, people gathered in a group to talk. Taking turns, they exchanged tales quickly, the haste in their voices, sometimes blurring the words. For greater than their desire to be heard was their hunger to tell. One could hear it in the fervor of the declarations, the obscenity shouted when something could not be remembered fast enough, when a stutter allowed another speaker to race into his own account without the stutterer having completed his. It was Monday, the last 2 days in September, a man began, as though given an account to a justice of the peace. I went to the fields in the early morning. When I came home at noontime, soldiers in my house. I'd heard talk, rumors of all these happenings at night. I took precautions not to go outside, but this was the daytime. The soldiers came, picked out some chickens in my yard, and told me I was a thief. I tell you, many a man was taken falsely as a thief. Another group of voices argued for the right to speak next, as if their owners had been biting their tongues while this last man was speaking. Only a few paces from me, shouted a woman. They had them tied in ropes, and Don Jose, who has known me my whole life, went at them with his machete, first my son, then my father, then my sister. The next man who spoke had been struck with a machete on the shoulder and left for dead. When he awoke the next morning, he found himself in a pit surrounded by corpses. I felt like my woman on our first night together, he said. She woke up in the middle of the night and started screaming. I said to her, am I so ugly that you should scream so loud the first night that you were with me? She looked at me hard and said this was her first night outside her mother's bed, and she had plain forgotten where she was. The group quickly grew impatient with that one. He was taking too long to arrive at the center of his tale. I thought of my woman when I woke up that morning in that pit with all the dead around me and all the vultures overhead, he said. Oh, the vultures, everyone chimed in. They could not get enough, those vultures, covering the daytime sky like a midnight cloud. If you were not walking fast enough, they would try for your eyes, these vultures. It was as if they could sniff the scent of death on you. It wasn't always just the vultures, someone added. The good birds became men-eaters too. The swallows, the warblers, they all wanted the taste of flesh. Waking up among the dead, I started screaming, the man from the cadaver pit went on. And then I thought of our woman and our first night together, and in spite of all the corpses, I smiled. The people around him smiled too, at the beauty of such an innocent moment, when a young woman wakes up in her new man's bed for the first time and forgets how she came to be there. Freedom is a passing thing, a man said. Someone can always come and snatch it away. They went on to debate the wisdom of having traveled forested valleys rather than mountain roads. They wondered what would happen to their relations who had disappeared. Some had traveled in large groups, and the nearly dead had to be left behind. They looked back and reordered moments. What could they have done differently? Whatever became of our national creed, they asked. Where was our unity? Where was our strength? And how can we not hate ourselves for the people we left behind? At the same time, they dreamed of the first meals their mothers and sisters, who they had not seen in many years, would cook for them. They dictated step by step what the first domino games and cockfights with their fathers and compadres would be like, the first embraces given to lovers and children. It all makes you understand that flesh is like everything else, the man who had been in the pit with the cadaver said. It is no different, the flesh, than fruit or anything that rots. It's not magic, it's not holy. It can shrink, it can burn, and like amber, it can melt in fire. It is nothing. We are nothing. The woman with the rope burns engraved on her neck asked if she could have my food. I nodded and went back to sleep, thinking, how can we not save ourselves for the people we have left behind?
Thank you. I'm going to ask to borrow somebody's book. Maybe let me borrow your book, please. Because I don't have EDWIDGE's edition.
I have the old woman's edition. The words are very big.
I like that. I have to say that I picked this part of it together with Amadou. This is, I think, page 178 with Dolores and Dolorita. You know that section.
Okay, yes.
So it starts, I think, you can start anyway.
Okay. So this section, the section I just read is when the people have arrived and they're at the center. This section is the traveling section because after the massacre is declared, And I would recommend, if some of you have not seen it, there's a really powerful film called Parsley, which was done by a Dominican filmmaker.
Yes.
It's really, it goes into even more, I mean, the visual. It's about a woman who then has to, who was in a mixed marriage, like this section of the book, and then they have to travel to try to reach the river, because even the people I spoke to, they were all trying to get to the Haitian side. They were trying to cross the river. So these folks in this part are traveling across the mountains, right?
Before you read the bridge, because I don't know if everybody understands the concept parsley.
Oh, okay.
And where it comes from, the Holy Bible, right?
Well, there's, one of the epigraphs in the book is from the book of Judges. It's 12:14. It says, Jephthah called together the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the Gileadites captured the ford of the river leading to Ephraim. And whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead asked him, are you an Ephraimite? And if he replied, no, and they said, say Shibboleth. So there was a parallel to this in this massacre where, because there was already so much mixing and people intermarried, the children, and so they were Black Dominicans, so they would ask a lot of the soldiers to differentiate between who was Haitian and who was Dominican. Would ask the people to say the word parsley in Spanish. It's perejil. Yes, I wouldn't have made it. The way I said it, because in Creole it's persil, so we say persil for parsley, and so if you said perejil a certain way, and in that film, which is called Perejil 2, there are moments where people are asked to say that, and that film makes a very, I think it's worth seeing. It's a very interesting distinction, because you see Black Dominicans also participating in the massacre in the film. So these things are, of course, always have exactly, and many layers. So you said to start on 178. So this is where they're still in the mountains.
So it's a group of Haitians and Dominicans, Black, traveling together?
Together, okay. So if you want to follow this one, you can. 178. We all took turns sleeping and waking. Each time they woke up, the Dominican sisters, so these Dominican sisters had Haitian husbands, had to remind themselves where they were in murmurs, secret grunts, and mute conversations with each other. I decided to sleep. I drifted off to sleep a few times myself, but when I woke up it was so dark that if not for the coldness of the ground and the pebbles digging into my side, I still would have thought I was asleep. Once when I woke up, I thought I felt the ground shaking. And this part too, when I read the book after the earthquake, I thought, that's right, when I was doing research for this book, the people would talk about earthquakes in that area. Then, yes, I thought I felt the ground shaking. Powdered dust and pebbles sifted down from above us. I clung to the soil with my fingers. Then, realizing that this would be a cowardly way to die, I shook a mound of dirt off me and stood up. Everyone rose and roamed in circle, trying to establish what was taking place. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the mountains shaking stopped. The night was still after this. The fireflies disappeared from the air. Even the bats must have been stunned. It's only the mountains settling, Wilner said, breaking the silence with his voice. Let it not settle on top of my head, Thibault said. There is also humor in this. Odette laughed, and I was calmed. I stayed awake for some time, waiting for the mountain to stir again. The stars stopped falling and slowly disappeared from the sky. We returned to our places, and perhaps because our bodies demanded it, most of us fell asleep. Eve was the only one who did not sleep. Towards dawn, I saw him sitting on the edge of the hill with his body facing the road ahead. He was playing a game in which he buried a stick in a pile of dirt and then scooped away the soil until the stick was standing straight up in the least amount of dirt. When the stick fell, he would lose to himself and start the game again. Over his shoulder, a funnel of dark charcoal smoke was rising from one of the small villages we'd left behind. Eve had become accustomed enough to the sight that he kept playing the game, only occasionally glancing in the direction of the smoke was drifting before it rose high enough to thin out and become part of the air. I tried not to wake anyone as I stood, but my movements caused more activity. Wilner's woman Odette woke up, then Wilner, followed by the Dominican sisters, then Thibault. By the time I reached Eve, everyone was awake and watching the fire burn through a village a few tiers below.
To the point where they separate.
Where they separate, okay. Okay, there. So the point, I mean, they start at, okay. Wilner turned to the Dominican sisters who were still watching the smoke, then addressed them in Spanish. She said, "You will travel with us no more. We cannot leave them alone here," Thibault protested. "They are not good for us," Wilner said, as if the sisters had already disappeared from our presence. "I will not be roasted like lechon for them. This is their country. Let them find the border themselves. They can go to any village in these mountains and the people will welcome them. What if they betray us?" Odette asked. "What if they send their people after us?" "They will not betray us," Thibault says. "I can sense this. We will let you choose your road, and we will choose ours." Louis Task spoke up. "And we'll go on to Dahoud, and I'll find Il est bien."
So in this part of and that's what's powerful about it, and they're looking at the images that they've seen, blood, burning bodies like bonfire, and people who feel that we cannot travel this path together anymore. I want to ask two family who are in the room to come up before we take questions. One is a young sister who was part of organizing a protest that happened in the Bronx. She's laughing. In the Bronx, we just met today, but she was part of the organizers of the protest that happened in the Bronx on Thursday. As folks, you know, we're in the middle of it right now. And we find it very powerful, very courageous that young Dominicans and young Haitians here in New York have come together to organize and to protest. And they were in a rough neighborhood in the Bronx. So Sister Victoria of Rassemblement pour Haiti, and please Rocio, please come up. We are all Dominicans, formerly of We Are All Dominicans, another organization of Dominicans standing with us. Please, you can borrow my microphone.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria.
Hello.
Bonsoir tout le monde, c'est Victoria, je suis Haiti après le tremblement de terre en 2006. But I've lived in New York for like 5 or 6 years now. But so Rassemblement pour Haiti is a mostly political education, like Haitian American led political education organization, but we also do participate in speak outs and actions, essentially in the legacy of a lot of the work that you guys have talked about, sort of like a Marxist towards liberation perspective, and trying to gear both Haitian Americans, Haitians in the diaspora generally, like towards an orientation for our country that we think is liberatory. So the action on Thursday was to protest what we see is happening, what we know is in the legacy of anti-Haitian and anti-Black racism that's in the DR that is due to imperialism, Western imperialism largely. And it was really difficult. We were met with a lot of like hate, frankly. It was in a Dominican neighborhood, obviously, but also I think it made a real impact, and it meant a lot to me to be organizing with other Dominicans who do, in Black Haitians of Dominican descent who do see the importance of organizing together, of saying no, like actually our island together is stronger together than divided, and we're not going to let Abinader and him wanting to be closer to whiteness and to lighten the island derail us and allow them to treat us Haitians like our lives don't matter. So I'm really excited to be here, and Edwidge is obviously someone that I really look up to. I'm also a writer, so this means a lot to me. But yeah, I'm happy to be in community and to meet all of you all today.
Well said.
I read this book 25 years ago. I actually have an original copy with me. It was one of my first introductions to the situation on the island. And after that, I had the pleasure of meeting Sonia Pierre in 2006, where I learned about the movement for nationality rights and the plight of Dominicans of Haitian descent in particular. And as someone who was born to Dominican parents, not of Haitian descent, I felt, that calling and that responsibility to use my privilege and my place within empire, and also being part of the dominant society within the Dominican Republic to speak out against what's been happening. After the 2013 ruling that officially denationalized 250,000 Dominicans of Haitian descent, and that's a figure we use because there are countless more. There are children being born today who are being denied their documents, and there are people who are under the threat of having their documents not be renewed. So I think it's really important to kind of understand just how insidious anti-Haitianism is in the Dominican Republic. We have the largest systems of US imperialism, yes. But back in 2013, we faced a lot of pushback around this issue when we called for a tourism boycott. Those people that laughed at us in 2013 are now telling us it is time. Luis Abinader is one of the wealthiest presidents in Dominican history. His family has their money and their investments in tourism. He has a university dedicated to hospitality, and so exactly. He comes from a family of Lebanese descent in particular. Something to consider, that Dominicanidad is very complex. Not everyone is black, and so this is a struggle of working class people, of black people, of defense of negritude across the island. And one of the ways that we can hit back is hit them, in their pockets. And so we're asking for, even if it's just black folks, if it's our relatives, it's black folks, to associations, medical associations, law associations, etc., to pledge not to travel to the Dominican Republic, not to vacation in the Dominican Republic. Apartheid is not a vacation. And this is what's happening in the Dominican Republic. We have to censure the folks who are, at the core of this violence. And it's something that it's been time. You have the community in Brooklyn who's been calling for it for years prior to 2013, and we need to be more vocal about it. Dominicanidad needs to be held accountable, and I feel like my role is to betray it at every turn, and that's what it is.
Thank you, Lucia. I had promised that the audience, someone in the audience who would get to pick the last piece Edwidge would read. If we have,